This is Natalie Jarvie, author of Ankler Media's newest newsletter, Like and Subscribe, which is all about the big business of being a content creator. Last week, I trekked to Park City, Utah for the opening weekend of the Sundance Film Festival. While there, I moderated a special live episode of the Ankler podcast about how brands are facilitating innovative and meaningful storytelling. The conversation, sponsored by the Watford Group and hosted at UTA House, included Oscar-winning producer Dan Kogan, TikTok creator Jordan Howlett, Adobe Chief Brand Officer Heather Freeland, and UTA Entertainment Marketing co-head Julian Jacobs. We talked about why branded storytelling is finally having its moment and how all kinds of creatives can embrace it in an authentic way. So, without further ado, please enjoy the conversation. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for braving the snow to be here with us. Now, I want to introduce our great group of panelists who are here to talk about the news show business. Before I do that, though, I should say thank you for giving us a space, UTA, and thank you again to the Watford Group for having us all here today. All right, so Julian Jacobs is the co-head of entertainment and culture marketing at UTA.
Hello.
We've also got Jordan Howlett. He's a TikTok and YouTube creator, and he's behind the Fast Food Secrets Club.
Hello.
We've got Heather Freeland, the Chief Brand Officer out of Adobe. And Dan Kogan, founder of Story Syndicate and Academy Award-winning producer of Icarus. I want to kick this off. We're going to be talking a lot about, the ways in which entertainment and brand marketing can kind of come together. And I think it's worth acknowledging that for a long time, Hollywood kind of turned its nose up at branded storytelling. And it really feels like that has shifted. And, Julian, maybe you can kick us off with, what do you think has changed? Why is it that we're seeing a lot more of these partnerships?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I think one of the driving forces that has accelerated and continues to accelerate what we're seeing is really the distribution and real meaningful distribution opportunities opening up for content that is being produced by or in partnership with brands.
What do you all think? Dan, I think in particular, you've been doing a lot in this space recently. Are you seeing a shift?
Yeah, we made a film 2 years ago that was funded entirely by PayPal in which they didn't appear. That was really about a brand alignment with a certain set of values. It was about a guy named Arlo Washington who started banking the unbanked in Arkansas. And he was a barber. He started creating opportunities for other barbers, and he noticed that no black barbers could open their own shops because they couldn't get loans. And so he literally, in a shed, started using his own profits from his company to bank other people, and he started growing the black community in this area of Arkansas that did not have any banking support because there was a history of redlining there. And so that was the story that PayPal fell in love with. They felt like speaking to people who were unbanked, speaking about different ways of using money and finding capital to build businesses was powerful to them. We made the film. It actually got nominated for an Academy Award, and it gave them all of these bragging rights and all of these things that they could talk about that were brand aligned without being specifically about PayPal. And that's just one example of many. I think that turn that Netflix had where they started accepting advertising and they had an ad base that you could join instead of, no ads, that was a we're never going to go back moment. And I think that we are just really in the infancy of what we're going to have with the alignment of brands with premium mainstream entertainment.
Something I've been noticing as well is that, the rise of social media, I think, has made it much more acceptable to promote a brand or produce, sponsored content. And Jordan, I know you're doing a lot of that work. Tell us about what your experience has been like, seeing kind of the way that your audience has accepted, branded content and storytelling as part of what you produce.
I think the best example is this. When it comes to storytelling, everybody loves a good story. Everybody loves a story. Everybody loves to be talked to in a way that is engaging. It sucks you in. I think the biggest misconception right now is that everybody's attention spans are next to nothing. And I think that's not true. Because if you think about it, if there's a really good story, they're locked in. You can't get them out of it. The research that people do when they're invested into something is monumental. And again, even when I make content, it's the best example of that. I love research. And brands are aligning with that in a lot of interesting ways, right? Hence why we talk about this. Even my management and I talk about this a lot, where I don't want to work with just anybody. I want to work with people that I genuinely feel like we have that respect or connection with each other, because it makes the content that much better. It makes the product that much better. Even the collaborations we do that much better, because there's a synergy there. So, I mean, I think it's incredibly important. I think that's what's going to drive a lot of this into the future of entertainment.
Dan, I want to go back to the story you told us about PayPal. What were those initial conversations with them like? Were they immediately on board with the idea of putting money behind something and not having their branding like directly attached to it?
You know, sometimes those conversations are helped by a personal relationship. So in this case, the producer of the film, John Hoffman, had a relationship with the folks at PayPal. He had worked with them before, and he said, listen, I have an outside of the box opportunity for you. It's an extraordinary story. It's a brand connection in terms of the message you want to send about the brand, but there isn't really a role for PayPal. And he was really pleasantly surprised that they embraced it very quickly. And I think we're seeing that more and more with brands, where it's not about we want to slap our name on something or you need to place us X number of times in X number of frames. It's more about how can we communicate to people that we are a value add in their lives? How do we speak to people and give them trust that we are a good brand to be associated with? And that creates all kinds of opportunities for storytellers.
Heather, tell us about how you're thinking about this and approaching this from the Adobe standpoint. I know you're doing a lot behind the scenes that people may not know about. So how does it help Adobe and your relationship with creators and creatives to maybe not always have, Adobe's name, front and center in a film or a project?
Yeah, I mean, we're experimenting with lots of different things right now. So we've been kind of dipping our toe in the water in original content. We just produced a series called Full Bleed that we're piloting on Roku right now, which is, I like to call it kind of Chef's Table meets the creative community, where we're celebrating incredible architects and graphic designers and data visualization artists and their personal story. And for us, that's about our values. And we want to be seen as a company that supports creativity and supports the creative community. So for us to, even if it's only our name at the end in the credits, we want to be seen as supporting that community, and that's a great way for us to do that. But we're also doing a lot behind the scenes to support creators. We have a film and TV fund. We just donated $5 million to that to help people finish their films or their works if it can't quite bring them across the finish line, or help fill gaps in their funding. And it's, again, an important part of telling our brand story, that we believe that creativity really can help people tell their stories and help people stand out and really reach their full potential. And so it's a really exciting place for us to play, and it feels so natural and organic given our brand, and we produce so many of the tools that creators are using.
I just want to also give credit to what Heather's doing, and also, as I mentioned earlier, just what's changing with the distribution opportunities. And I think Roku has been so far and ahead of their interest and ability to reach out to brands and production companies and really want to collaboratively figure out how to work together and really breaking the model. And I know that folks at Warner Media here at Sundance really trying to figure it out too. And it's in this moment of chaos and disruption, I think the opportunity has never been more ripe. And the rule book is being unwritten and written kind of as we speak. And also just a nod to what you said earlier, Dan's story about the PayPal film. And, last year we had the Nike, Alex Gibney's Sue Bird documentary that we sold to Netflix. And even just when the Oscar noms came out a couple of days ago, not to forget that YSL Productions is one of the big investors and co-producers of one of this year's Oscar-nominated movies. So there's more and more examples of this happening, I think, than ever before. And I think the hard part is to find the creative angle that feels most authentic, to find a great story to tell, and then a place that's willing to sort of help put that story out there.
I don't even think it's always so hard, Julian. I would jump on your acknowledgement of Roku and say, they are killing it in this space. We are making a show with Roku, with Tracy Ellis Ross, where Tracy has always, since she was in her 20s, traveled solo. She loves solo travel. She would prefer traveling solo than being with someone else. And so it's a show. It's true. And she meets people. She loves it. And she travels around the world solo. And we're doing a show with her in which her hair care brand Pattern is a key part of it. And it's integrated because she uses it every day. And Roku, to their credit, embraced that relationship and ran with it. And I think that, when you're hungry and you want to build to the next place as a platform, engaging with brands now is seen as a positive as opposed to a negative. And I think that just gives you a sense of how much a part of our world this is going to become very quickly.
Going in the other direction too, we just did short form content series with Benny Blanco, and your point about it being authentic to both him and to us was really critical. He uses our products, he builds his own content on it, and he also loves cooking and food. And so we paired him with a local restaurant in LA and had him help them remake their kind of marketing and their visual design using our tools. And it was a great way, because he's an amazing talent and totally entertaining, to tap into his following, his passions, his kind of charisma, and kind of the moment he's having to elevate our products in a really authentic way. It was hugely successful for us.
That word authenticity, I feel like, comes up a lot when talking about branded storytelling, particular when talking about branded storytelling with content creators like you, Jordan. I'm curious, take me back. Do you remember what the first brand deal was that you did? And did that feel like a compromise to your authenticity? Or how did you kind of think about that, and make the decision that this was something worth doing?
Well, I'll tell you what, the first brand deal I ever did was with Cash App. So not necessarily too off the mark there. I was working at a pizza place at the time, 9 to 5. I didn't have no more than maybe a couple $100 to my name at the time, but I loved the 9 to 5 job. I loved the life that I had, so I chose to stay in that. And even when we were doing social media, I think I didn't leave the 9 to 5 job until I had roughly about 8 million followers or so. But our first deal was with Cash App, and I was still working at the time, so it was pretty aligned. I think the talking points were pretty loose. It was pretty much just me being like, hey, we all need money sometimes. And that was kind of the whole tagline of it.
Authenticity.
Really authentic, because it was coming from a real deep place in the heart there. But at the end of the day, all it means is if you like it, if you think your audience will like it, and if everybody is in agreement that it's out of a place of liking it, loving it. You have to love it. If you do not love it, it's not authentic. It's pretty as simple as that. Or if your deepest feelings aren't in it, it's not authentic. If I'm telling you something and I'm genuinely passionate about it, the authenticity is going to come out of there. So having those morals alongside of that, it'll benefit greatly. So that's kind of how I introduced it.
Yeah. Jordan, you have millions of followers, so I'm sure most people here have probably come across your content. But for those who haven't, you have a very direct, confessional way of speaking to the camera, speaking to your audience. I feel like it would be very obvious if something you were doing wasn't authentic.
Oh, for sure.
Because
you can smell it a mile away.
Yeah. So do you have those conversations with brands? Do you say to brands what you just said to us? What is that like when you first, have an opportunity? How do you kind of speak to them about doing something that still feels right for you and for the audience that you've built?
Well, the first thing, and I promise you this is because it's a learning curve for all of this. And again, my management, Michael Berkowitz and Doug Landers, they're the ones that really introduced me to the idea of how these things should go, right? Things should go the way that's most comfortable to you. So we first see who wants to come work with us. That first meeting, I want to know, A, why? Like, why'd you pick me? What's about? Do you guys actually watch the stuff? Do you enjoy it? Do you just see the numbers and think, okay, let's get something going? How does this work? I want to know that there's humans on the other side of this alongside that I'm human as well. Then from there, we talk about the idea, the creative. I'm open to their creative. I want to know what they want to do. And I actually have ideas as well. And we should find a good middle ground. It shouldn't be hostile takeover one or the other. And then from there, we really flesh out what we want to do. And it's, at times it can be rough because it's a lot of back and forth sometimes, but the end goal is always fun for me. It's always fun to have something to where you're passionate about it, you're happy about it, and you feel like you represented yourself and the brand the right way. So that's kind of been the process of it, but that's how it's been introduced to me.
I think this point about the creative is so important because I imagine that people think, oh, brands, they're going to be all over you and they're going to tell you what to do and because they're giving you money and you're going to have to do it. And in my experience, platforms that you're actually making a show for, streamers, are much more aggressive in giving you notes on an edit than brands are. The brand wants to know that fundamentally what you're doing fits with the brand. And as long as that's happening, they're psyched. Like, go with God, do your thing.
Well, it's funny because we've had to kind of train our teams internally who want, sometimes when we work with creators, we have certain individuals inside who want to slap a big Adobe in front and write every piece of the script or what have you. Yeah. But we know, what your followers want to see. And they come to you for a reason. And so we've had to really kind of loosen up our creative control and hand it over to the creators we work with because you know best what's going to resonate and come across authentically to the people who follow you.
I think the conversation that you and Dan are both having about your interactions with brands and what you want from them and is really poignant, particularly here also just at Sundance, sort of the culmination of these worlds kind of colliding. And I think one of the things that we've seen at UTA is that creators and brands want to have a more direct relationship. And I think that the growth of the creator economy and the influx of media money that went in, and I think this view of creators and storytellers as media channels versus creative partners is not working anymore. And I think that we're going to see more and more of those walls coming down and more creators and storytellers who are talking directly to the marketers, Heather. And I think when you do that, that's really when we've seen those creative partnerships win, last, not just be a moment in time.
Heather, I'm curious, hearing you speak about how you work with creatives. I listened to another podcast that you did, where you talked about this kind of guiding question that you have around, is it good? And how do you think about that? I mean, because of course the creative partners that you're working with have their own ideas about what makes something good. How do you support that while still, getting what you need out of that relationship?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny. So I oversee our creative team internally at Adobe too. And I was riding over here from a movie with them this morning, and we were talking about how when you give creative feedback, you have to use this mantra of not just is it good, but is the feedback you're giving going to make the work different or is it going to make it better? And I think that's a really critical question to ask yourself, which is, anyone I could give, let's say we were working with Jordan, I could give him feedback to make something different, but unless I felt like, and he felt like it was going to make it better or good, then that doesn't really work, right? And it changes his original vision, which he knows is going to resonate with his audience. So I do think when you're in a brand position, the way I look at it is, the creators we work with are going to know what's going to resonate, are going to know what's going to be good for their audience. I need to make sure the feedback I deliver is going to both make it better, but also make sure it's hitting my strategy and the goals, which is, of course, the reason that we're working with the creators. So I think it's always finding that balance. And it is a fine line and a dance that you do with the people you work with. But I think in the end, if it's authentic and kind of meets the strategy, then I think it ends up being great, not just good.
Dan, I'm curious from your perspective, you've made things that your peers have said is good, are great, that have been Academy Award nominated, won. How do you think about, making something good in the context of working with a brand partner? It sounds like, you've had really positive experiences where they haven't gotten that involved with the creative, but speak more to kind of how you deal with that duality as you're putting something together.
I haven't had the experience of it being a duality with brands. I mean, everything that we try to do at Story Syndicate is to make something great. So when we have worked with brands, we tell them what our ambitions are. Our ambitions are not to make something okay that's watchable. We don't want to make watchable. We want to make something that blows you away. And again, we don't always succeed, but we're going to try our asses off to get there. And as long as your collaborators are with you at the level of ambition you have, and everyone's eye is on the same prize, it tends to work out. And those are conversations you have at the beginning. Like if it's very clear that someone would want you to do work that simply, advertises a certain aspect of a brand and it doesn't matter how good it is and it's just about minutes on a screen, then we wouldn't be the right partner. And you settle that stuff at the beginning. But if everyone can be aimed in the same direction, it can work.
That's why Dan and Story Syndicate are so great, is because there are a lot of people out there who just are fine making the watchable stuff. And it's really hard to find great people, such as both of you, who care about, what's the filter? Making it great, make it good. So it's a little tricky in that regard. And I think you guys have done an amazing job.
The thing about the things that we all do, that everyone here at Sundance does, is that we are creating experiences that people have in the culture. We're creating moments of revelation for people about their lives, about their world. We're reimagining the way that people can see themselves in relationship to other people. It's sacred work. And yes, we're all in business and we all have to have a job and we have to have a paycheck and et cetera. But making creative content that is going to move and touch people, that is sacred work. And so you have to find the partners that see the importance of it, and it's not just product. And again, once you find those folks and you're aligned at the beginning, it can work out.
We saw this, shift at the beginning of the rise of subscription streaming, where everything was subscription based, and there was a move away from advertising a little bit, and we've now seen that pendulum shift back, in part because of Netflix. We've got, ad-supported verticals on Amazon Prime Video, everywhere. Yeah. And I'm curious what kind of opportunity that is creating for, storytellers to, maybe get a little bit creative with their, kind of brand integration, or, the ways in which they work with different kinds of partners.
It's gigantic. It just opens more space for more funding to come in. I mean, everyone knows that we're an industry that in the last few years has been in significant contraction. And I don't see that changing in the next year or two. Beyond that, who the hell knows? It's hard to imagine our world, but anyone can see past a year or two. But yeah, the industry is in contraction. It needs new sources of funding. Streaming has turned out not to be as profitable as everyone wanted it to be. And so filmmakers need resources to do great work. And the fact that streamers have opened up the door to an advertising tier just opens up that much more funding and opportunity for filmmakers.
One of the reasons why things have been a little slow, I would say, or complicated, is that as streamers have been trying to figure out their own advertising business, there has been the discussion between brands and production companies and creative partners and great ideas that are being birthed. But the challenge has been the brand doesn't really want to commit until the distribution is solved. And so it's this constant chicken and egg thing. And I think what's happened now is that the distributors are more open to working with those creative partners at the earlier onset and making those commitments earlier on, which eases the brand's anxiety over investing in something that may never get seen. And I think that's really going to continue to accelerate as well.
That's so right. That shift is huge.
Well,
yes.
and there's this interesting symmetry in what you said from the filmmaking side and the brand side, whereas you all are looking for increasing sources of funding and ways to fund the content that you want to create. It's getting harder and harder for brands to find ways to break through and reach customers. And that's where we need each other, right? And so, and I know from a marketing standpoint, the things that are going to break through with customers are beautiful, incredible, inspiring stories, right? Or funny stories, or anything memorable. And storytelling is at the heart of what helps both bring a brand's values to life, but also what becomes memorable for their customers. And so for me, that's going to be far more valuable than any advertisement I could do. And so I think there's this really incredible match and being made between the two industries right now that's going to spark just an incredible proliferation of brilliant stories and great platforms for brands.
I also love what I'm seeing on social, and also we've been talking a lot about kind of the more long form end of the spectrum, but I think that there's been this awesome surge of longer but still short form stories, more premium, being told on social. And I think that that's kind of been a little bit of a white space in the last couple of years. And I think there's been some amazing content studios that have been birthed with real creative experts who are focused on creating a little bit more long form, a little bit more premium, social first stuff. You're one of those people, and we're really excited about a company we work with called Gymnasium that's doing some great stuff too. And so I think that's another sort of leg in the stool of this conversation, not just the big docu TV size stuff, but also what's I think going to be coming on the social side too.
Well, I'll tell you what, and just to add to your pretty much all you guys' points, the importance of storytelling is, I mean, it's the top of the list. And funny enough, before I even got started with social media, I had made a documentary, and I collaborated with a filmmaker right here, Jonah Girk. He's amazing, and he helped me try to learn how to tell stories the right way. And I wanted to tell mine, and so I wanted to express how I felt about this baseball journey. I used to play sports before this. I was going to get drafted by the New York Mets in 2020 before COVID derailed the whole situation. And then it led me into social media. And in that time, playing baseball, I started at 16. And so anybody who is familiar with sports, that's a really dumb thing to do.
At 16?
I started
Wow.
I started at 16. I never held a baseball until I was about 16 years old. It was so difficult because I wanted to be a professional really bad. And when I explained this yesterday, where if you start early on, that's the best way to get to your goal and still have a time to have a life and whatnot. When you start late and you want to make it to the top level, you immerse yourself in it. Everything you do, you eat, breathe, walk, talk. I cut off relationships, conversation. I only did baseball. That was it. And so because of that journey, a lot of pain went into getting to that point, sleeping out of the car, really not explaining how difficult it got there. And by the time I got to that point where I was about to get drafted, it was a feeling I can't even explain. I can't replicate it. There's nothing that will replicate that because it's a Goliath level dream. And so by the time COVID happened and it got derailed over something I never thought I could expect, being a pandemic, you question everything, who you are as a person and what you want in life. And I didn't want my story to just kind of go untold because I felt like I went through a little too much to just, tell my nieces or nephews or sons or daughters one day, like, oh, I play baseball. I didn't want to do that. So Jonah had decided to help me along with my brother Elijah to help make this documentary. And it was my first introduction into storytelling. And mind you, at the time I had maybe a couple hundred followers. I didn't have any idea how social media worked. And it reached all the way up to LeBron James. He was able to see it. And it was the first time I got a chance to show people who I was. And so leading into short form, I took that same mentality of just showing a lot of myself, just showing a lot of me and just who I am, even personality wise. And it's been the most beautiful transition into find any kind of success. And you see it with filmmaking, you see it with product placement, you see it with brand partnerships. Storytelling is the anchor of what you want to do. It doesn't matter if anything else. My brother says this, and I use it all the time. For people who are curious about social media and they ask, how do you go viral? There's no real secret sauce to that. But my brother always said, an objectively good video is going to do good. It does not matter what time of day you post it, who's in it, what you say. It's going to do good. The most popular videos are the most grainy, out of focus videos you can barely see, but it's the funnest things you've ever seen, right? But it's because there's something engaging in it. Storytelling, a good story, something objectively good is going to do good. It's going to find the right eyes. It's going to go there, right? And so because of that, aligning somebody with the same ideals of wanting to tell a good story is going to get you the most success you've ever seen in your life. I mean, shoot, Squid Game is probably the best example I could think of. I never heard of Squid Game until the story of it, in the first season story of it, blew me away. I mean, who here watches Colin Farrell's The Penguin? Has anyone seen it? It is one of the best pieces of TV I've seen in my life. The storytelling was so amazing. You forgot Batman was in it. I'm sorry, I don't mean to drone on. I apologize, but it really is important. It is so important. And so, yes, I do agree to all your points.
So I'm curious, so there's a kind of a common thread, Jordan, between what you do and what Dan does, which is that you mostly deal in the unscripted space, the documentary unscripted. And I do think that that's where we've seen a lot of brands, start to play initially. And I'm curious, and I'll kind of just throw this to whoever wants to take it, whether we will see more, scripted storytelling, start to have that brand support. Julian, you mentioned Emilia Perez, which had a backing from YSL. So, maybe you can tee us up. Do you think that that's kind of the next, forefront here, the next frontier for branded storytelling?
I hope so. It's complicated. And the big reason it's complicated on that particular topic, in my opinion, is the budgets. Scripted content is 10 times what non-scripted, a doc, is. And so the risk is greater. And often a brand is coming in to non-scripted or docu or short because the cost of entry is much lower, the risk is less, and the gap on scripted is so much greater, and so the risk is so much higher. So, I've seen a couple of things kind of moving through the system where there's actually multiple brands who are partnering to try to get involved in a scripted project to sort of offset the risk themselves. There's been sort of talk of sort of brand funds predominantly to come together to sort of support scripted programming in a more real way. But I think the other piece beyond the financials and economics is the creative. I think a lot of brands want to tell stories that align with who they are or are inspired by what they stand for, and non-scripted and documentary is it's not easier, but it's oftentimes a more natural way to do that. Dan, what do you think?
Listen, you nailed it. I mean, the budgets are just a different scale, but I don't see why it's not going to happen. Honestly, I mean, you go back to the 50s, to the birth of television, it was one brand or one product brought you an entire show. Why is that not going to come back? I see absolutely no reason why that isn't possible. And I think it's going to take a brave CMO. We got one right here. I think it's going to take an alignment with a movie star, with a subject matter, with a something that's going to change it. Like something extraordinary will happen, and then everyone will go, "Oh yeah, it's going to work." I mean, that's how culture tends to change. It's not just slow things over time. It's something explodes. I mean, for example, with Netflix, I remember when Making of a Murderer happened, and it changed the entire trajectory of what Netflix was doing in nonfiction. And they had no idea that was going to be the case. So sometimes something happens, someone does something, it explodes, the public embraces it, and then everyone chases that. And that is, at some point, that is going to happen.
Yeah, I'm curious. I mean, we spoke a little bit about the challenges that the industry is going through right now. I mean, we've seen a real pullback in spending on particularly scripted TV, but on the film side as well. And I am curious if that does create an opportunity for brands to come in this way that we're talking about.
Absolutely. I mean, we're trying to dial in our strategy by trying lots of different things right now, whether that's kind of the short form content I mentioned or the long form. We're doing a lot of partnerships with creators. But I think it's increasingly, like, even when we look across our entire marketing strategy, the amount we're talking about creators in that equation and as a platform for us to tell our brand story is exponentially higher this year than it was last, and this quarter over the one prior. And it is just, when you think about how brands are evolving, it is not a one-way conversation where I'm talking at you. It is an engagement and a dialogue that we have to have. And being able to do that in partnership with a creator or in content they care about is so much more powerful and memorable when you're trying to communicate what your brand stands for. And so I think it is, like I said, in our channel mix and our strategy, it is taking an increasing role. And I think we will continue to evolve and dial that in. And I think a lot of brands are thinking the exact same way right now and trying to find where their strategy is and where they feel like they can play authentically.
I think that's a great place for me to end my portion of this conversation. We have a couple of minutes if anyone has questions from the audience.
Hi. This question's for Heather. So when you said that you're trying a lot of things, kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall, see what sticks, what are some of the challenges that you and your team are facing in terms of how to measure whether something was good or not, or whether it worked for you, or whether it's improved the way that your potential customers will view your brand?
It's a great question and the bane of my existence. No, I'm kidding. But it is what every marketer struggles with. And I think particularly in this space, we are all still figuring it out. And so we try and map it to the core goals and business metrics that we have where possible, but that's not always possible. So take the Benny Blanco content I talked about before. We look at things like how many views that got. We look at things like, how much engagement that got. But we also kind of built in a suite of tools around it and assets around it that brought, and a competition where someone could win $10,000 to remake their business, much like Benny had done for this Mexican restaurant in LA. And that helped us be able to prove how many people saw it, how much it stuck. We got people actively using our product as a part of that whole experience. We had 10,000 people enter. And so we tried to build things in that would help us measure it. And my hope is that as we build these things in and we can quantify it, that increases our appetite to invest more, try more, and kind of loosens kind of the need, like we're doing proofs of concept. But in other areas, like the full bleed content I talked about, it's a lot harder. The PayPal content you talked about, it is a lot harder to measure, and it does take a little bit of intestinal fortitude to kind of charge in that area. But I think it's a risk worth taking for brands right now, for sure.
I don't need a mic. I can project. It's fine. Y'all hear me? Yeah. All right. I learned to speak loud since I was young. Thank you for speaking today. My question starts with you, Jordan, and then I want anybody else to reflect on it. Focuses on audience retention. I know you think it's come closer. Let me talk to you for a minute. And then you bring in your audience, and you go into what you're discussing about, which I think is very interesting and engaging. So my question is, how would you go about formulating what would be good for a hook for content that would be more on the long form aspect? When you're pitching a brand, maybe they want to see your analytics, you start seeing that those numbers for your audience then become retained. So I wanted to hear your take on that, and then what can creators do to maintain audience retention since it continues to shrink day by day?
That's a great question. Not to bring it back to sports, I don't want to be that guy, but the one thing that you learn is that sometimes it's simply just, it's not that you change your mechanics, you change your mentality, if that makes sense, right? So the come closer thing, it legitimately wasn't even for audience retention. That was simply just, I was doing a video one day about a gigantic squid that I thought would look like a kraken. And it legitimately freaked me out. And so I'm like, come here, get away from me. I don't know why I did it. And it was just because it just felt like I wanted to do it. And people really enjoyed it. And I was like, okay, cool. They seem to enjoy this. So I just continued. I tried to stop, and they didn't let me. They said, please don't ever do that again. Yeah, it worked. But it was something to that, right? You listen. You, like with anything, you listen. You listen to your audience. You listen to the people you're giving your content to, and listen to what they like. I think focusing too much on a hook, or focusing too much on hooking someone in the first 5-10 seconds, and focusing too much on the analytic and on the number side of it can really affect what you have as a whole. For best example is this, right? A lot of the videos that I genuinely like and I feel like got the most engagement, the best stuff happened near the middle to the end of that video. The beginning is all set up for that video. And for a lot of things, a lot of it is setup. Setup has to happen regardless. A lot of people will try to, foreshadow and put something entertaining in the beginning and then have people stay. But at the end of the day, like we talked about before, if you have something solid and good, it doesn't matter really where you place it, people are going to find it and they're going to attract to it. And so that's kind of where I try to keep my mentality on and content in general, long form, short form, film or otherwise.
First off, thank you guys for being here. Appreciate this. Very insightful. On the topic of distribution, I want to just look at the idea of democratizing that to some extent. Because as we talked about, most of the distribution comes through a handful of streamers. And it's a very challenging environment right now, and it can be very daunting for emerging storytellers. Obviously, TikTok and YouTube are helping with some of that, but I just want to get your guys' take of what do you see as the future for distribution and for really seeding emerging artists in this world right now?
I said it earlier a little, but I really think, to your point, there's a few premium streaming platforms today, more than a few, but as you mentioned, it feels like a small group in this moment. And I think there is this white space of a little longer form, but still short on, that's going out on social. And everybody has been so focused on trying to get their thing on Netflix that I think we're going to see a lot more happen there. It's been a minute. I remember, reading headlines. I'm sure we all remember the YouTube, their content fund and the Snap Creator Fund and all these funds. And it's been a little quiet. And so I think that this is the year where we're going to see maybe not the platforms leading it and spawning it, but other investment to help push more of that forward. What are you guys?
Yeah, I would add that I think for film and television series, one of the most important things that needs to happen for independent storytelling to remain vital is to find a way to go direct to consumer. And, all of the streamers are global multinational corporations now. They don't want to take risks. They don't necessarily want political controversy. And so there are a lot of things they feel they just can't do that they might have done when they were much smaller, and now the stakes are too big. So where are we going to see those films? Where are we going to see those politically, culturally, socially controversial, challenging, difficult films that, streamers can't program because all of a sudden people are saying, oh, I'm going to cancel my subscription. So how are we going to get those films seen? Films that come to the Sundance Film Festival. I think the answer is we got to figure out ways to go direct to consumer. There are many different people experimenting with this, using, as you mentioned, social media as a way to use AI to find out who on social media is interested in their content, market directly for them, and then have them buy something and watch it. That's outside a platform, that's outside a website, that's direct through social media. There are lots of companies doing this. Jolt is one, another is Kinema. Like all this experimentation is happening, and it's happened on the political right very successfully. There's Angel Studios, who has been able to aggregate money from its audience and then have them pay for things and then market directly back to them. And I think that those of us who care about this kind of content are going to have to find our version of what that is. And it's going to take, that experimentation is not actually just going to be filmmakers. We need engineers, we need social media marketers, we need programmers. That is the next Sundance, is who are those people that are going to help independent voices go directly to consumer? Those are the people that we all need. And I think that needs to be part of the future, or all the independent storytelling is going to, all these films are going to be made and nobody's going to see them.
I think it's a great question and a great answer, particularly here at Sundance. I mean, we're supposed to all be going to see movies too, not just this panel. And these filmmakers are here. Dan has 2 films in the festival, and everyone here is trying to find distribution, by and large, right? And I think that there is not enough conversation, to Dan's point, about new entrants, how we work together to create new models, go direct to consumer for a lot of the product films that are here this week.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. So I think you also have to start looking at brands to help identify and distribute content too, right? We did a partnership with Imagine Entertainment, and it was something called From Minutes to Movies, and it was entirely on Instagram. It was a short film competition. I was honored to be one of the judges and get to watch all the incredible content that came in. And the top 3 get mentorship from Imagine, and ultimately they'll develop one of those short films into a feature-length program. And it's just I feel grateful to have been a part of that, because we're fostering the next generation of creators and filmmakers. And I think it gives them a platform that they might not have had otherwise. So I think brands also have to step up to this moment too. And it feels particularly relevant for us, given that we support creators, but I think other brands should be stepping up as well.
It is a great example. And, the first paycheck I got in the entertainment industry was something similar, where I managed something called the Chrysler $1 Million Film Festival. This is almost 20 years ago, and God, I'm old. But what they did was choose 5 short filmmakers, and they gave them each a very small amount of money to make a short that had a Chrysler car in it. Fine. That was their thing.
Yeah, it was ours you had to make on Adobe Tools. Yeah.
Okay. So, but then the winner of that, chosen by a jury, was you got $1 million to make your first film. The winner of that. So that was all Chrysler, all their money. The winner of that was Derek Cianfrance, who, if you're Sundance folks, he went on to make Blue Valentine, which premiered at Sundance, and now he's had this extraordinary career. He was a great artist and storyteller. That would not have happened if not for Chrysler. So all this is a way of saying, like, there doesn't have to be this opposition between brands and creativity, brands and great storytelling. You can find the win-win. I think it's incumbent on all of us to do that, to bring more resources into the world for storytelling.
That's great. Well, Julian has said we should let you all go watch some films, so I'm going to release you out into the snow. Thank you again to UTA for the space and the Watford Group.